Hey, what's up, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to the Pitlane Podcast, episode 106 today, to review the entirety of the 2018 F1 season. The end of review podcast here with your usual host, myself, Aarav, Callum, and Tom. Lads, 2018 is a wrap. It's right in the middle of winter. You know, everyone's shut down now for the Christmas period. We're going to post this video literally right before Christmas, like 2-3 days before. So it really is now time to reflect on 2018. And did you guys enjoy it? It was a good season, wasn't it?
It was a blast. I thought it was a definite step up from 2017. A bit more competition, a bit more fire, and a slight bit more unpredictability. I think in terms of the start of the season, the second half of the season did go down, and I think that did disappoint us with how Ferrari dropped off in certain situations. But overall, I think with the on-track battles, that definitely improved from the previous season. I think the tension in the start of the season and also throughout between the three top teams, it really gave us a good little mixture in the pot to shake it up. Obviously, we knew that the championship was pretty much done and dusted towards the second half of the season, really, once a certain driver came out a little bit further on top than the other. But, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed this season. I hope 2019 can build upon it to carry on pushing that tension and carry on pushing the excitement.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was actually way more similar to 2017 than I think what we gave it credit for initially. It was almost a carbon copy, how the first half of the season, second half of the season, the Red Bull resurgence at the end. And I'm hoping for next year, pretty much like you said, Cal, it's a bit more different. Hopefully, Red Bull and Ferrari can stay there for the long haul later on in the season. But generally, a really good season. I think some real standout moments, you know, with people like Leclerc, for example, Gasly at Bahrain, just some real special moments. Perez getting that podium at Baku. And just generally a really good season, really, really enjoyable. And of course, at the end of it all, we say goodbye to Fernando Alonso and that mythical epic shot with Vettel and Hamilton right at the end to kind of put a nice bow tie at the end of it. So really, really good season. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll go through kind of championship order then, kind of reviewing each driver's season, I guess, and in doing so also their team in a way. I think that'll be the best bet instead of going race by race, because if you want to know our thoughts race by race, you could just watch back the podcast from this season, basically. So we'll start off with then the world champion, the five-time man, Lewis Hamilton. What can we say? I mean, I think especially after Vettel had the mistake in Germany and Ferrari started to go downhill, we saw at the same time, clearly you could kind of see how good Hamilton was driving, making no mistakes, near, I want to say, bulletproof a lot of the time, really. You know, I think, have we seen the best Hamilton, like, ever this season? Yeah?
Yes, for me, yeah, without a doubt. I think I would say bulletproof. I would say 99% perfection, like
right.
Genuine. Like
that's high praise, high praise.
Mistake-wise, for example, Abu Dhabi qualifying, the first run in Q3 locked up at the chicane, a little bit scruffy, but second lap just perfect. Like every single time in qualifying, you know, like this year, qualifying has been Lewis Hamilton's strong
Singapore
point.
was something he just posted about recently again.
Exactly. Right. Like Singapore was incredible. Hungary in the wet when Ferrari were looking favourites with that wet session. He pulled out the bag as well. Spa got on pole around there as well. Like there were times when you didn't expect him. Silverstone as well springs to mind because like, he was literally shaken, like visibly shaken after the qualifying session. Like he's just pulled it out of the bag when he really needed to on various occasions. And it just goes to show. Even Austin as well, I think, when he got pole and Vettel was like 0.6 behind, and on the radio Vettel was like, how much do we miss it by? And then he was told 0.06 and Vettel was like, oh shit, or like, oh F word, you know, on the radio. So it just goes to show, I think, in every department he's been impeccable. And when he hasn't performed in the race, it's mainly down to the car, like for example Austria, when the car let him down, or Mexico when the car tire combo didn't really work. So for me, I genuinely mean this, I think this is his best ever season in Formula 1 for me.
I'm glad you've gone before me because it makes me look slightly less biased. But
exactly,
I think
tactical.
I think what I have been a fan for him basically his whole F1 career, and this season I feel like what Tom just said about qualifying. I mean, it's the qualifying. I think we knew he had the speed. We knew he had the speed from his very first season in Formula 1. But it's the consistency, and I tweeted about it, I think, after Abu Dhabi qualifying, where I said that it was a joy to watch Hamilton qualify this year because you were waiting for that lap almost. Like, we were expecting that Hamilton lap, throwing it back to when Senna used to pull out those laps where a driver did not want to ruin that centre lap because that's what everyone was looking forward to. And it feels like we're getting towards that with Hamilton. And especially like Silverstone, like we've said, absolutely shaking afterwards. Singapore, one of the most incredible laps I think we've ever seen in recent years. But it's also the consistency in the way that he manages to bring the car. They look sometimes, some Fridays they've looked absolutely nowhere, and somehow partner with Mercedes, they've always turned it around. They could look half a second off the pace, and then by the end of Q3 and by the start of the race, they're looking like they could dominate a race, for example. So I think it's just the consistency and the fact that I don't think Hamilton actually had a crash this season. I think it's his first season he's ever not had a crash, because obviously 2017 he still put it in the wall in qualifying. But that's still a big statement, because in Formula 1 or even in motorsport, you race cars to crash cars. That's usually the statement. You do crash a car eventually. But Hamilton didn't. I think the only bit of contact he had was a little bit of wheel rubbing, for example, with Verstappen in Bahrain. But he didn't put it in the wall at all. And you compare that to his main championship rival of Vettel, who faced backwards many a time, was in the wall in, for example, let's say Italy, when he replicated Schumacher going backwards in the wall at the Parabolica. So I don't know. You've just got to praise his consistency, and his speed's been there. But I think this is why I think you realise that I think that Mercedes car had the very best extracted from it, and that's why it won the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers' Championship so early.
Yeah. I think it's fair to mention we could maybe give drivers and teams ratings over 10 maybe in this video.
Yeah,
I think that might be a fair indicator. So I'm going to say a 9.5 for Lewis this season.
I'll have to agree with that. A good 9.5.
Yeah,
there's always room for improvement.
I won't give him a 10 because there were those moments where the old Hamilton still was there. So, for example, even though it was team mistakes or, car, whatever, desperation kicks in sometimes for him. So, like, for example, Australia. Also, I think it was recent. I think it was Mexico, obviously, because of the tyre situation. Brazil as well. Sometimes there is that desperation almost, or trying to find an answer when there probably isn't one. And get a bit flustered maybe. I think also China. Bahrain didn't really go that well for him as a race weekend. But that was all. Most of it was really in the first half of the season. Like, literally, the second half of the season. Since Hockenheim, really, that's what I think we're going to talk about a lot in this video. Since Hockenheim, it's literally just been one-way traffic.
Yeah, I think also, but I think Mercedes themselves turned it around a bit, from Hockenheim. Sure. I think a lot of that maybe dampening of Hamilton being on top in the first half was more. I think the Mercs were genuinely behind Ferrari for a few races there, and they definitely had to wake up a little bit. But I think Mercs kind of almost like a big giant that's like slow to start off with when they realise they're a little bit behind, but once they get going, there's no stopping them, and like it's almost kind of like that. Like the resources they have back in the factory were crazy, but I think they maybe just didn't realise, maybe what their major, weaknesses were, but they, slightly fixed them in the first stage of the season. By the time we got to, 2/3 in, they were very, very strong. Obviously, hand in hand, Ferrari had that thing where they admitted at USA that they went backwards basically on some of the developments, some of the new ones, the new parts they brought were the wrong ones, and they actually went backwards in speed. So that would have also helped in to make the Mercedes gap look bigger, but both hand in hand just basically showed, once again, I think Mercedes have been that team in the V6 era that, they just dig deep and they just claw performance out of that car when sometimes, you think now, like, 5 seasons in, like, sure, there's nowhere to go now with this car. Like, it's the law of diminished returns, but Merc just keep finding stuff. And obviously Ferrari are pushing hard, and, they found a lot of stuff this season. It was a very exciting season for Ferrari. Like Vettel literally said, next season, they just need to get that little bit closer. They just weren't quite there this year. It seemed like they were, but that was more just, I guess, Merc not being on pace. Once Merc showed up, it kind of showed that Ferrari still have a little bit to go. But
for sure.
I mean, obviously Hamilton, he's a massive team player as well. I mean, he does care about the team, it seems, and obviously he does the best job the car can do. I mean, look at Bottas on the other side. I know we'll get to Bottas is 5th in the championship, so we won't get to him in a while. But talking about his teammate, I mean, in comparison, you just see the class that Hamilton has is just a different beast. But I mentioned Vettel. Vettel was 2nd in the championship. We mentioned Hockenheim there. I guess that's a big talking point of his entire season. I guess as an inflection point, if you will. What do we think overall, though, of Vettel's season? Like, we talk. Both of you mentioned the mistakes, the spins. I don't know.
It didn't seem like the same Vettel from 2017. But even then, you could point out in 2017 that Vettel still wasn't perfect. And I think this is the problem that Vettel's facing is no driver's fully perfect. And as much as we can praise Hamilton for the good season that he's still had his off moments, as Tom mentioned. But the thing is, Hamilton has those perfect days. I mean, okay, let's say an unperfect day is, let's say you still score points, which is something that obviously Hamilton's been exceptional at. With Vettel, he has more off days, and comparing yourself to Hamilton, it just looks like there's a bigger gap than what there is. But obviously, you compare Vettel to the rest of the field, he still looks like a very good driver, and obviously he is, because he's still a 4-time world champion. But he has had more off days this year, and he needs to watch his back. I think he was very frustrated with the season, and he's going to work on himself.
Years, obviously, I mean Hamilton had his fair share of bogey. 2011 was a very big bogey year. I mean,
but it's rare to see it so late in their career.
Yeah, I mean, how old is Vettel now? It's
30,
getting on, isn't he?
31.
31, yeah.
31, yeah. So yeah, it is odd, yeah. But
what I mean is, I think Vettel he's Sebastian Vettel. He's one of the best drivers. He's the second best driver on the grid in my opinion, and he has got a very, very quick young protege coming through the ranks now with Leclerc next year, and he will have to step up, and he will do. And I think it will be an exceptional battle between those two. But I think on reflection of this season, he still had an exceptional start to the season. He pulled out some incredible pole laps. When the races that he won, he did control them exceptionally well. We watched one of the races, Spa, in real life. They outclassed Mercedes whilst they were fumbling over an engine that they didn't understand. So when Mercedes did drop, Vettel was always there most times to pick it up, apart from the end of the season. But momentum's a very cruel thing, because it's not only the momentum on track, it's the momentum in the media, it's just the words that are being said, and he was being pummeled into the ground constantly. And I just don't think anything was really on Vettel's side towards the end of this season at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think momentum, it just felt like everything was against him right towards the end. I think he deserves praise. I think he's had a better season than people give him credit for, and I'm not really a Vettel fan. I mean, I was one of the many that if I was at a race in 2013, I probably would have been booing him on the podium. To put into perspective, but I've got a lot of respect for the guy. I think, we said years ago when he first signed for Ferrari, it was almost like a bit of a madness move. Like, why would you go to Ferrari after such a bad season? But we did say back then, I think, kind of over Twitter and also on the podcast in the early days, you mentioned it. You only really are justified as a really good driver on the grid when you can win a lot in one team, but then go to another team, rebuild it from scratch pretty much, and then go winning in that one as well. And Vettel was literally so close to completing that mission when it comes to Ferrari. And if he can win a championship with Ferrari after what he did at Red Bull, it goes to show knew he was really good for Red Bull, but it also goes to show Vettel as a driver does have a lot of pull as well. For this season, I'm going to give my grade first and then explain after. So I'm actually going to give him an 8 out of 10. I don't think it was that bad. He made his mistakes, but ultimately, I think how bad the car was for those races and how good Hamilton was, on the other hand, at the same time, I think that still would have been too much to cost him. You could argue Hockenheim was a mistake of his, which it absolutely was, but obviously given the conditions, the tyres, the rain, it's one of them things where, yeah, it's his mistake, but it can happen to anyone, that one. So I don't really think that one's it's not like a mistake like he did at Japan or Austin. Those different kind of mistakes.
Are more deliberate.
Like Hockenheim was one of them ones where I think he knew Hamilton was pressing on with the pace, and the lap he actually crashed, the lap before was the personal best of his, so he was trying to respond to the pace, and obviously it happened. And I think, for example, Bahrain was a great drive from Vettel. I think that drive doesn't get enough credit, how he went so far into the race on those soft compound tyres, given he'd lost Raikkonen and his teammate out of the race because of what happened to the mechanic. China as well, he was looking really good in China as well. You could argue unlucky with the safety car timing, then get taken out by Verstappen. There were times where Ferrari in the first half of the season definitely could have had a few more points if they'd done it better. But generally, I don't think Vettel's had a bad season. He's had his mistakes, but I think the fact Ferrari also dipped in performance as a team, that kind of didn't help the situation, because if he'd had a faster car in those races where he did spin, you could argue, like Austin, where he did a good recovery, he could have maybe recovered better in other races. And if the car was good enough at Singapore, for example, he might have actually been where everyone expected them to be. So, I think all in all, I think 8. Maybe I'm going over the top, but I think
I'd give him a 7.5. So you're not going that over the top, really.
Like, for example, Silverstone was an incredible performance from him again, and Germany qualifying as well. I remember that, how he literally dominated qualifying at Hockenheim. He has had his moments where he literally was untouchable as well, like Hamilton in many ways.
Yeah, no, I think definitely when he was shining very, very bright, and you could see the spark that he always had at Red Bull, and even the first few early days at Ferrari when he got the win in 2015 Malaysia. You know, he's clearly still right there. I think, the mistakes that he had were the deliberate ones, obviously not Hockenheim, but the spins he had were bad ones, but he still had so many great moments. Like, remember the start of the season when we were talking, like, first few races, and we were seeing Ferrari, you know, basically the ones on top, and Vettel seemed on top, and it seemed like this glorious wave of, like, oh my God, this is going to be such a different flavour. And then obviously things changed, but you can't forget that at the time, that was a big thing. And obviously you take into fact the car went maybe a little bit backwards here, Merc went up, Hamilton went up along with that. Yeah, I think sometimes it makes the gap look bigger than it was. So I know I would be inclined to say he was still, no doubt, you know, very, very good in so many parts of these seasons. Unfortunate though, sometimes when you're that high up, sometimes the lows just seem even lower. And if you're in a championship fight, those kind of lows are obviously, like Cal said, they're just nitpicked in the press. You just don't have things going your way then for the media side of things. I'm sure for him as a team leader, it was probably very, very tough to try and keep everyone going as a team leader back at the factory when you're the one driving the car and you're the one that's made that mistake to spin and then try and recover. But I think, you know, you have those...
Also, credit, like, I think people forget, like, Ferrari had the fastest car at times, but for example, Australia and Bahrain, he won the first 2 races. The car was definitely not the best car. Like, you could see at Australia, Ferrari were quite a way behind. Like, Hamilton was dominating Australia quite comfortably. So, like, even then, winning those first 2 races was kind of like a bit out of 2017 in terms of getting something out of nothing. So he still had those moments where, like, I think he's still done credit to him in a way for the way he performed, basically.
Well, I think Bahrain was, I think more so than Australia. Obviously, that was more just kind of driver skill. Was like, sublime, like really good stuff. So to drag that car up basically and keep in that position. So I mean, there's a good point about a lot of the time at the beginning of the season that Ferrari car was kind of there, but I think a lot of that was also some great strategy work and just good classmanship from Vettel to do that kind of thing. I think towards the end of the season, I think the way he was talking in press, you know, and the way he just had his demeanour about him, I feel he definitely needs a very good reset, very good break to just switch off, come back, because like Cal alluded to, next year is going to be a very tasty fight with him and Leclerc. I think it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be interesting. I've always liked Vettel, but, you know, I will also admit that he's got that weakness, I think, of he does get rustled a little bit easy sometimes when you have aggressive personalities, i.e. Ricciardo 2014, and I just don't know. I'm a little bit fearful, but then at the same time, I would also love for him to actually, like Cal said, make Leclerc, him making him stronger and come back fighting and having a good fight. That would be cool.
When he gets flustered, it does remind me of Lewis a few years ago. Like,
good point. Yeah, it's a good point.
For me, Lewis is very recent, and literally probably since the 2017 reg change, he's kind of really started to get on top of that. It's almost like the Rosberg. Since Rosberg beat him, he's almost found another level to himself in terms of
mentally.
Yeah, like he's got another level in terms of...
It's a level of maturity in a way.
Yeah, and I think maybe Vettel needs to take that extra step to really stay ice cold in the the tricky situations.
It probably kind of a case of like, you know, because those Rosberg and him were like, you know, childhood friends in karting. You know, that you kind of have that. You know, you can't really. You like to think you can control your mind, but sometimes it, you know, it really digs deep, and maybe that really nicked at him. And once he'd left and retired, it was kind of a case of, okay, it's not someone I've known for ages, not my little childhood, you know, rival, whatever, or, you know, person I raced. It's just, you know, it's Bottas, it's the team, you know, a bit more level-headed. I've got a job to do, professional mind switched on when I talk to them and whatnot. So, I think us three have said that. Like we said that in the first third of the season, that he seemed way more, you know, just like mature and switched on in terms of like, you know, he's trying to get the team together to make sure they get back in this, and obviously we know they did get back in this.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's also worth noting that with all the negatives surrounded by Vettel, if we move on to Kimi, who came third in the championship.
Good segue.
If those things happened to Kimi, they wouldn't have been blown out anywhere near as much proportion as what... for example, let's say when I think what's a good example? When did Kimi retire this season? I know he retired in Abu Dhabi, but that doesn't really matter. Well, I swear he retired somewhere else.
Spain was a mechanical failure. Again.
That would have been blown up so much more if it was Vettel. People would be using it as a point of, that's when the championship changed. That's when. But because it was Kimi, arguably the second driver, pretty much the second driver.
Pretty much. Yeah, I would say it is.
I mean, this season because he wasn't in the championship fight. Because
there was that odd thing, though. There was that odd thing, which I saw some, where some journos were reviewing the season, some of their little things. They did kind of pick up on that. And I kind of agreed when you kind of look into perspective. There was that weird period just before USA, 3 races before. I can't remember which was the race.
It started at Hockenheim, if this is what I think
Hockenheim,
you're on about.
yeah.
It started with Hockenheim, but then Hockenheim, we have Italy, Singapore, Russia. Is those weird moments where Ferrari suddenly switched and went, you know what, we're going to treat them equal. You know what, we're actually going to put Raikkonen at a higher pedestal. And I said something in Hockenheim. I literally actually remember this tweet. I said in Hockenheim after the crash, I feel like that crash might have not happened if they had just swapped them round earlier
I remember you
in the race when it was drier and alleviated pressure from Vettel, because then he might have not been pushing as hard in the wet period to get a gap, because he would have had a bigger gap from the dry period.
Better off as well.
But what I mean is, in the fact that obviously Ferrari had this weird period where they were treating them equally, but then the media and the fans were still treating them as 1 and 2. And so the things that happened to Kimi weren't blown up anywhere near as much as Vettel, but in reality, Vettel only had, one minor crash, which has caused this huge domino reaction. And then, 3 spins. The one with Hamilton was a racing incident. The Suzuka in Austin was his fault, in my opinion. So, it's only little things. But in terms of Kimi, who had probably his best season since 2013, I think it's fair to say. Without a doubt. Obviously leading in Italy
after 55 years.
Yeah, he got his win in Austin. He was leading for the majority and got pole in Italy, but was leading for the majority of the Italian Grand Prix, fighting with Hamilton, which was incredible to see. It was really nice to see Kimi and Hamilton go at it once again. It felt like I was watching a 2008 Grand Prix. And then ultimately being done by the fact that Vettel wasn't there, really, when Bottas was used as a bit of a roadblock to ruin Kimi's tyres, and then that allowed Hamilton to save his, and then overtake him once Kimi's tyres started to go a little bit second hand. So, but, if you look at Kimi, it's really strange that he's leaving Ferrari this season. Because if we think about if I think of his seasons between 2014, when he rejoined the team, in 2018, I feel like as every season's gone on, he's got better. Which is odd to say he's now leaving, rather than I'd have sacked him at the end of 2014 when he had a woeful season. Obviously, the car was dog wank anyway, because Alonso was struggling just as much. But you get what I mean? It was like he's being sacked, being dropped at the season where he's done best. I've
definitely been a very vocal person to say I think they should have taken the risk so much earlier. Now it's kind of like I still wanted them to take the risk, but I can also be like, you know what, this was a very weird season to take the risk, but eventually it had to come, I feel. But I'm
happy though. I think the timing's perfect with Leclerc, Raikkonen switching around. I think because Raikkonen kind of proved this season he does still have speed to be in F1, and I think almost like was mentioned when the switch was announced, I think him being in a Sauber environment and not so in the PR heavy Ferrari one, I feel like he might actually be better.
I have some insider knowledge actually on that, because obviously me and Tom are part of Veloce Esports, and so Veloce power Sauber's F1 Esports team, and our Sauber pro drivers got to go and have a Christmas party at Sauber's HQ, and Kimi was actually there because he's basically already been integrated into Sauber, and Kimi was actually there, and according to those guys and also Jamie at Veloce and all them, Kimi seemed way just more happier in that environment already straight away compared to any time in the season where he's been in a Ferrari suit. I think not being in the Ferrari shining limelight and being at Sauber back, with a couple of his old mates from way back when he started F1, there'll be less questioning about Sauber because generally, obviously, it's a lower team, so they're not going to have as many PR junkets this next season. I think he's going to be a much happier Kimi. He was all smiles in the post-season testing. It is going to be, I think he's going to enjoy it for himself.
If the FIA prize-giving ceremony was anything to go by, he definitely seems happier. I think he's definitely happier. And also, if you notice in the pictures, everyone in that Sauber thing rocked up with a suit, and he's there with like a Christmas jumper on.
Yeah, he didn't get there.
So-
Apparently, he was an hour late. They were going to do some sort of presentation thing. He rocked up an hour late because he was off somewhere else before. And then I mean that and also I think also he himself personally, I think he's just started to let himself off the leash a little bit. I think his wife's helped a lot. I think his wife pushes him a lot to be a bit more kind of himself and just a bit more jokey. I'm assuming they are together as a couple. So, yeah, I think it's great for his side. And then I kind of alluding to, Tom, on the other fence, Leclerc, for him, it's a great step up now. Chance to go against Vettel. Had a mega first debut season. The momentum's there for him. A lot of Kimi fans will be upset, I guess, that he's not in a top team anymore. But I think when you think about it mentally wise, how the drivers are feeling, I think it's a great sort for both of them.
Yeah, you can't make a case against it, even though there's sentimental.
Yeah, that's
there,
a perfect sentence. Yeah.
Personally, I think, I will go to you first because obviously I think you still need to rate Vettel as well. So maybe you want to rate both drivers, and then me and Cal.
I'll go between. I'll probably more inclined with Cal 7.5, but I almost I want to go in the middle of you two because I do think he did have some great performances, but yeah, the little nicks in armor. Raikkonen then, I would say it's solid 8 for Raikkonen. I think if I compare himself to previous seasons, I would say that's an 8 for a Kimi. True. Maybe compared to other drivers, I would say maybe then a solid 7 for number 7. Yeah,
I'll split you and I'll say 7.5. I'll say
right. Okay.
Decent season for Kimi.
I'd have said 8 actually. I thought he had a very good season. I mean, there were a few people on Twitter that were very keen to jump on me whenever Kimi did well, and then I was keen to jump on him whenever he didn't do well. But it was all a bit of a laugh. But he's in terms of it's like if you could give most improved player award, it would be to Kimi because he's really improved, and to get a win after such long time and proving haters wrong. I mean, it was a very suitable way to bow out, in my opinion.
You've got a couple of contenders in there, I think, for most improved, if we're going to talk about that one. But I think, seeing as now we've done both road drivers, I think in terms of grading the team, seeing as that team is now done, I'm going to give them... it's just actually a tricky one because there's a lot of moments to think about in your head. So I'm going to say 7.5 for Ferrari.
I'll give them an 8.
I think there was too many dodgy moments for me to give them any more.
I'm gonna go. If we're saying like Mercs or what,
for Mercedes for me would be about a 9.
If Merc are a 9, I would say Ferrari is an 8. I would say Ferrari's an 8 if Merc's a 9. I think. I think that 1 point is basically the fumble of going backwards with updates. And then a few little questionable strategies here and there. But
see, I mark them down that 0.5 because of that kind of not really prioritising any driver when it mattered.
Right, yeah, shoot. Yeah, that was a... Races. Yeah, that
so
is,
like Hockenheim, Monza...
That was a dodgy sort of thing to do halfway through.
For me, that's kind of like just as bad as Mercedes messing up a strategy because they effectively might have cost Vettel crucial points in the championship. Like the radio after the Monza qualifying session when Vettel said... We'll talk about this after. That was very telling to me. So, I'll probably do 7.5 to be honest.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we've done Ferrari, we've done Merc. We've not done Bottas yet because he's actually behind the next person, which is Max Verstappen, P4 in the championship. Verstappen, obviously, slow burner. But once he got going at the end there, he was the man to be kind of looking at, basically. Like towards the end of the season, we're pretty much like, okay, is Verstappen going to take the fight to the Merc today rather than Vettel and Ferrari?
This is my most improved driver award for the season.
Well, I mean, throughout the season.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
I mean, this guy, the way he started the season.
I forgot how bad the start of his season was, actually.
It was a very bad start.
Monaco genuinely those kind of like roll of the eyes in the Red Bull garage after Monaco, like it genuinely felt like Verstappen was actually on relatively thin ice at the time, but literally that was it. Monaco was the turning point. After that, he got his act together, and towards the end of the season, like I said, he was quick, really quick in that Red Bull car.
I mean, it's going to be sad, actually, with Ricciardo going, because it was always a fascinating battle between Verstappen and Ricciardo, because it was such a seesaw. I think it was so hard to dedicate a number one driver if you had to pick one. It was so difficult, because Verstappen had plenty of off days. Ricciardo, I mean, was very much limited this season, but in terms of Verstappen, I mean, towards the end of the season, he is showing, and he will win a world championship one day. I mean, you've got to forget, you can't forget his age. He's got so much time still. But I think because he's now 21, I want to say.
Yeah, I want to say that.
Yeah, he turned 21 in September. So the thing is with Verstappen is he just needs. I think he's got to aim for this not perfect season, but consistent season where
consistent,
he can.
Yeah, that's the word. It's building that.
Obviously, this is what we've come from with Hamilton. Obviously, speaking about Hamilton, there's a reason why he won the World Championship, just being consistent throughout. And obviously, we saw one of the Verstappen heavy-headed or like boiling heads where obviously he got hit by Ocon, and anyone would be fuming being knocked out of the race lead, be it whether or not it was your fault or not, and there was plenty of discussion about that. But in terms of moving forwards, he needs to learn not to be as hot-headed. He needs to learn not to be just be a bit more cautious, as Hamilton kind of grilled him for after the Brazilian Grand Prix. Just you've got to realise the risks that you're taking. Verstappen moving cracking season, had a cracking end to the season at least. Some incredible overtakes, and I mean in Brazil he really did shock us. So moving forward, he just needs to hit that consistency, and he'll soon be cooking on gas, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between winning, like having seasons like Verstappen's had, where he wins some races, and you can see the raw speeds there, and the difference from that to actually mounting a full campaign, which is the kind of, there's a difference between a campaign and just winning some races. A campaign is, like you said, consistent through the entire thing, getting those points, grinding out the points. Like, when you can't have the race win, you grind out, get the maximum, and also the same thing for Red Bull, obviously. Red Bull need to try and transition back into that campaign mode, because they're even like, every time we hear Horner, isn't it? Like, it's sometimes there's races where they're like, oh, we can win today. And then most of the time it's, oh, we can't win today. It's a shame. So both of them, as a team, him and then Gasly coming in, that 3 unit, that's going to be an interesting thing going to next year. But this season, I like what I saw. Yeah, he was hot-headed. He still needs to cool down sometimes. But at the same time, he did handle it more maturely than he might have done a year or two ago as well. You got to give him that as well, I think. Because I agree with what he and Ricciardo and Horner were all saying about his little Brazil incident. I think he could have gone a lot worse post-race because, you're losing a win. Like, he could have gone a lot worse. So, yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts on Verstappen. But
I think I'll grade him a 7 out of 10. I still think the first 6 races, considering 6 out of 21 is almost a third of the calendar.
Yeah, I would go with that.
It's still like there was a lot of points. Looking at the standings, he could have easily got third and maybe even pushed Vettel a little bit for second. So yeah, I think too much of a black stain on his record this season. I think the first 6 races, especially the way like China, for example, just completely in a very rookie-ish era, just completely taking out Vettel, for example. I think that was not great for him. But the end of the season was so strong. It was kind of it was completely a tale of two halves for him, I think.
Yeah, like his end of season was like 8.5, I think, and the beginning of the season was like 6.5.
I even said 9. Yeah, like it was
so
good.
It kind of just averages out to 7.5, I guess. Yeah, I'll kind of be inclined with that as well.
I'd be along the lines again. 7, definitely for
7.
me. I mean, what you said about the start of the season, it's just too much of. Again, with trying to launch a campaign on the season, you can't be crashing and having incidents with Hamilton in Bahrain and taking Vettel out and doing a carbon copy crash you've had 2 years ago in Monaco, and just
obviously Baku.
Baku, yeah, the Baku.
That was 50-50, but still it was hard racing.
It's still just getting yourself into a hard racing incident like that with your teammate is just a little bit silly. So. And also, like, I think, what else was he? Australia, he span. Bahrain, he put it in the wall in qualifying. So, 7.
All of it. Yeah.
Well, Valtteri Bottas is next, P5.
This is a hard one.
I'm going to say very little on Bottas, to be honest. I felt for him at Baku, but that is about it. I don't think even he should have a seat for next season, to be honest. I think Ocon would have been a much better shout. Yes, it's risky. Yes, it worked this season. Bottas and Hamilton is a partnership. But, I mean, just take a risk, Mercedes, and just stick in the guy who's clearly going to be a little bit more fiery, probably a little bit faster than Bottas. He's a safe bet.
Yeah, I've got to give him almost a double grade. First half of the season, I'd give him an 8. I thought, up until Silverstone, included Silverstone, maybe I could maybe give him Hockenheim, because if the team would have not come in, he might have actually been challenging with Hamilton. I'll give him up until Hockenheim. I'd say an 8 out of 10. Second half of the season, he was no better than a 5, in my opinion. He was nowhere. Absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, last couple of races, it was embarrassingly bad.
Raikkonen was way ahead of him, and normally they're pretty close together on track. That's when it kind of gives you a gauge of where he stands.
Yeah.
I think 8 first half of the season, a 5, maybe even 4.5 in the second half of the season. Literally nothing special, no standout moment. Didn't even get a pole or a race win this season, I don't think. Did he get a pole? I don't know.
He got a pole in Austria.
Yeah, true. So 1 pole and no race win. That kind of says it all, really. So I'm going to give him a 6.
I was about to say 6, yeah. 6.
I was going to, okay, maybe a 6. I mean, let's reflect on the start of the season. I mean, Baku, it was, I mean, I doubt I'd even really push it to that, to be honest. I mean, start of the season, Baku was leading, but that was
China as well.
China, he was also leading, but he still got outraced obviously on the slower tyre, so fair enough. But I don't know. I just, even when he's leading, or for example when he was chasing down Vettel in Bahrain, it just didn't feel like it was. I don't know. He doesn't really excite me, Bottas. He's not.
No,
he doesn't have that on-track personality. He doesn't have a huge off-track personality, to be frank. But
he got pole at Russia as well.
Oh yeah,
and he was leading that race, so I will give him 6.5, because you could argue he might have been able to win Russia as well.
He had 2 race victories from him, one from his team and one from a bit of debris in Baku. But other than that, the reason I've just done the numbers, he finished 161 points behind Hamilton. That's 6.5 race victories.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's okay. So let's do 4.5 race victories. Where are they? Why was he finishing in 5th place in Austin and in Brazil?
Yeah, times like Australia and Spain spring to mind when they really had the car Mercedes. Paul Ricard as well. There were 3 races where the Mercedes was untouchable and he couldn't actually touch his teammate. So that line didn't sound great, but still.
We didn't start the season off either by putting it in the wall in Australia as well.
True. Yep. So I think 6.5 is fair grade. Because of Russia, I give him 6.5.
Yeah. Yeah,
so Mercedes as a team, I'm gonna.
Well, I said 9.
9.
I do want to give him a 9.5. I do, but
I don't think they're that perfect. I think
for the benefit of the video, I'll say. Thing is, I agree there was mistakes there, but they bounced back so well this season, so well. I have to give them credit for the development.
But it was certain strategy decisions, like in Austria,
it was strategy like Austria.
Well,
and Austria, they started off the season.
They both broke down, to be honest. Yeah, Austria, they both broke down. So for me, that's not really a factor. For me, it doesn't really matter because they wouldn't have made it to the end anyway, regardless of the strategy. So, yeah, I'll say 9. Okay, I'll say 9. I was going to go 9.5, but I'll say 9 for the.
Ricciardo's next. We all know how Ricciardo's season went.
Ricciardo's going to be very hard to judge because take everything we're saying with a pinch of salt here, because we only really saw him finish 9 races, I think, this season. 9-10 races.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to rate him with the asterisks of he basically had half a season to race.
I'll give him probably a 7.5. I mean, I think towards the end, the second half of the season, when he did finish, which I can't really remember when. I think
Abu Dhabi. I think that was the only one.
Abu Dhabi, and he was. Did he outrace Verstappen then?
No. Well, no. Verstappen finished ahead of him, but I think it was pretty close.
So
he did that weird strategy.
Oh yes,
where
he did.
He's trying to come back towards the end, like he did in China, basically on the fresh tyre. That was what they were trying.
Yeah, which was a slightly odd strategy.
He kind of got.
But
nuts.
I mean, you got to pick out his highlights of Monaco, exceptional qualifying lap and incredible race to manage. His failure of the MGUK, even though he's Monaco and it was incredibly hard. So just the fact that he managed to limp that beast home is incredible. And also China taking the opportunity and absolutely running with it. So I mean, it's exceptional. Once again, I think there's no real surprise that he won Overtake of the Year again. Even though he only had 1 nomination this year, partly because of the other times he was off at the side of the road, broken down. But it's very hard. I mean, I have to give him 7.5, but the reasoning, he has an exceptional Monaco. I can't think of many races that he finished.
I'll simply say I'm going to give him an 8. I think he's had a really good season. The point standings don't reflect the season he's had. I think, coincidentally, ever since it was announced he was leaving, the luck he's had, Monza, Spa, Singapore onwards and onwards has been the worst I've ever seen any driver ever have. Like, it was borderline hilarious.
It was very comical.
Literally,
it was
when Horner was like, "Oh no, I'm sure we've got enough engine parts here and there to like cobble together an engine," like that's when it was like laughable at that point, like ridiculous. So I would give him an 8, and I think it was a 7.5. I agree with you, Cal. But what gives it an 8 for me was how it does go to show on his day when there's no car issues, like Mexico in qualifying, he's still a top driver.
Yeah, that was a brilliant pole position.
Nothing gets in his way.
Yeah.
So for me, Mexico, that gives him an 8, and I think he's had a good season. China as well, like you said, Monaco. You kind of said it yourself. I think he's had a really, really good year. I think, considering the incredible luck he's had.
Yeah, I mean, I think you two perfectly summed it up, really. Just all the highs and the lows there. Yeah, you didn't really see much of him, so it's really hard, apart from Monaco, to really pick out Monaco and China to pick out any other big highlights. But when he had his moments, he had them, and obviously, hopefully, next season he's not having as much bad luck, and you can actually see the kind of caliber he is, because I think a lot of people really went down on him this season in some aspects, and kind of almost forgot that he's still one of the top drivers, I think, on this grid. So, I would go for maybe, I would say 8 with a big asterisk, because I want to say 7.5, but then I keep thinking back to China and Monaco, how good those races were for him. Like, those were like champion level kind of wins in a way. Like the way he did that, like the dive on Bottas was amazing, and then the control at Monaco is like unbelievable. So, yeah, I'm inclined to go 8 asterisks then, and we round out for Red Bull as a team then. Tricky one, because you kind of have to factor in then Ricciardo's all his retirements, but then at the same time, obviously on Verstappen's side of things, when he was going well at the end of the season, it was a really good team. So I don't know. I would say for Red Bull, I would go. I gave Merc a 9. I went Ferrari 8. So I would say Red Bull. I would say 7.5 for me. I think.
I'm going to go 7.
I'm going to give 6.5.
I was going to say maybe 7, maybe even 6.5. I was going to say with an asterisk.
That level of reliability was piss poor from a team that had won 4 championships in a row. Just, you cannot have that. If you want to be winning world championships again, you can be in Formula A, or you cannot have reliability. Look at Ferrari and Mercedes, how many retirements they had versus, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. You can be as quick as you want, and you can nail as many strategies if you want, but if you're not making the checkered flag, then you're not going to be rated higher.
To an extent. I think a lot of them were Renault related, which is out of their hands. My reason, I'm actually going to go 6.5, and the reason being is because, similar to what we said about Vettel and Ferrari picking the number 1 driver, for me, they showed their hand really early, wanting to go Verstappen, and ultimately, I think that's what probably turned Ricciardo away from re-signing with the team. I think that kind of preferential treatment, again, kind of a la Webber Vettel, showed through, and I think that is what steered Ricciardo away from staying with the team, to be honest with you. Because even at that point when he re-signed, or when he didn't re-sign, at that point, Ricciardo's had 2 race wins, Verstappen had none. And the team still kind of were leaning towards Verstappen, in
especially
regards.
during the likes of China, when he made that mistake, trying to go around the outside of, I can't remember who, went off in the middle sector. There was a few rookie mistakes at the start from Verstappen, and Ricciardo was always picking up the pieces. Sure.
And I don't know, at no point did, for me, Ricciardo ever feel like he was part of the team. There was times where it was just a Verstappen show, especially when Ricciardo had his rotten luck, even on interviews and stuff, Horner was just like, it's just bad luck, I'm sure I get over it. Whereas if that was Verstappen, they would be grilling Renault, they would be going in on them, basically. Yeah. And with Ricciardo, it was kind of like, you bounce back next race, it's okay, it's not a problem.
Right, we've got Honda next
We'll put an engine together. Yeah, so for me, I'd give him a 6.5 because of the way they treated a driver that for them has been very good in an era where their cars have been the worst in a long time. So I'm going to say 6.5.
Right, and thus concludes Formula A.
Formula A. Formula B is now Nico Hlkenberg, who I don't think he cared much about winning Formula B, but he won it. So kudos to him. Well, he had a very strong season. I think Tom, you said it a few times. Underrated driver, and this season he definitely showed how good he is.
I still think he was underrated this season, though. I still think he had an underrated season. I think
Yeah,
compared
I would go with that as well.
for this time, considering Sainz had a full season with the team, and same machinery, and
I think
Hülkenberg
Sainz
had
got
his,
unlucky a few times though this season.
I was going to say, I think Hülkenberg had his fair share of bad luck as well at times in the season, because he was I think he was on a bit of a reliability streak, and then he had a couple of races where he retired.
Yeah,
but
middle part of the
generally,
season.
I think he's had his moments. Like, for example, I remember at the start of the season, he was 6th every single session, like qualifying race.
Oh,
he
yeah.
was,
I
boom,
almost
straight in
forgot
there.
about that joke.
Like, literally, he was like 6th in Australia.
I forgot
I
about
think
that.
he was on like 8-race streak of 6 places. Like, it was crazy how consistent and bulletproof he was. And then obviously Sauber kind of found their form, has started to not make so many mistakes, and also it was like Renault kind of didn't develop as much. But still, Hülkenberg was like always there, to pick up any scraps, and ultimately that's why he's finished 7th. And I think he's had a great season again. I really do, and I think him next to Ricciardo next year is going to be such an exciting lineup. Like, I'm really, really looking forward to seeing those two, because also it's going to once again give you a really good chance of judging each driver, because when there's new pairings, you kind of understand where they kind of feed in. So, we know how Ricciardo is versus Verstappen. We know how Ricciardo is versus Vettel. We know how Hülkenberg is versus Perez and Sainz. Now we're going to see the two of these, see how they match up. So I'm excited, and I think he had a really good season. I really do.
I've got to agree. I mean, there's a reason why he came out in the first in Formula B. If you say it's the consistency. I mean, obviously he rounded off the season with a bit of a bang, but I can't really remember him doing many mistakes this season. The one I can remember is Baku when he put it in the wall, when he put the rear end into the wall. But other than that, I mean, when he has had the car and the machinery under him, he's done the deed, and he's outraced his teammate. I think he outraced it and outqualified his teammate pretty much all season, which is very. I mean, as I've alluded to, Sainz did have a little bit of bad luck, but you make your own luck sometimes in this business, and you just there's a reason why he's came out on top in terms of the inter-team battle and throughout the rest of Formula B. So, like what Tom said, comparing him to Ricciardo, I think we're finally going to see how Ricciardo faces up against another one of the top drivers, because we've already seen Sainz as a sticking point, who obviously came through the Toro Rosso ranks and was pitched to be maybe in the Red Bull seat and being in one of the top seats. Now we can see how Hülkenberg kind of fares in another one of those one-on-ones.
Yeah, that'll be very intriguing for next year, how that actually lines up. But next is Sergio Perez, the Mexican, who I don't know, I don't know if it's just been like I'm just looking at it weird. I feel like he had a quiet season, but he's just snuck in there to P8 with 62 points.
Yeah,
he obviously had the podium, but apart from that, he had a very quiet and just got on with the job season sort of thing.
No memorable overtakes I can think of.
Just Baku, really.
It was Baku and I think the thing is, obviously Baku wanted to bounce back from the previous year after being put in the wall by his teammate, and I think he learned to keep his nose clean throughout that Grand Prix, and he did, and picked up the pieces when the likes of Hamilton and Vettel came coming back through the field. And
Singapore was a very scruffy one for him.
Yeah, I remember Singapore being quite a big sticking point. But also, I mean, obviously throwing it back to Spa, it's some incredible qualifying, getting on the second row in a place where Force India have previously had good qualifying and race back in 2009. And that incredible save going into Eau Rouge. I think that's got to have some honourable mention, because God knows how he kept that out of the wall. But yeah, like Ira said, keeping it quiet,
I think now the biggest
away.
thing I remember is Singapore. It's just that thing out of like the Ocon thing, and then the swipe across Sorokin.
But let's not forget almost that he did save his own team from going completely corrupt and going bankrupt, basically. Even though he had on track, he didn't really do much. Off track, he did save Force India. He did force them into administration. And probably one of the main reasons why, A, he has a seat next year, B, Lance Stroll has a seat next year, but C, we've still got Force India, even though they will not probably be called Force India next season, they will change. We've still got I don't know about you two, but I've got a soft spot for that team, and even if it's not going to be called Force India, it would have been a huge, huge shame to lose them off the grid to the fact that they are
such a solid in part of
just
the
a good team to
midfield.
have.
Yeah.
That it feels like you'd have a massive gap in the midfield of like, okay, there's already a gap from A to B, and then in B there's a huge gap of, okay, where's these two pink cars gone? Like, where are
Yeah,
they?
exactly. Yeah.
I do want to say, first of all, because obviously we forgot, I want to say Hulkenberg 8.5, because we didn't actually
8.
grade. Aarava?
I would go 8. I would go 8. Yeah. For
Right,
Hulkenberg.
and then in terms of full season, I've opened up a Sky Sports tab to get some further context. I'm looking at, for example, qualifying battles between teammates to kind of contrast to the point standings at the end. So, for example, I think this is quite interesting reading. The qualifying battle between Ocon and Perez. Ocon won 16-5, but yet Perez outscored by around 15 points. So it goes
Consistency.
to, I think, 13 points. Yeah. So in that regard, I guess Perez, whatever he did on Sundays, pulled through. And I'm not really his biggest fan, but obviously I'm kind of shocked as well, kind of seeing where Ocon is and
I would
the
say
qualifying
Perez.
battle.
I would give Perez a 7. I think.
Yeah, I'd go with that. I'd say that's fair enough.
Yeah, I'd
I
have
would
to
say
agree.
7.
I'd have to
I'd
agree
say
with
7,
that, yeah.
Yeah. And we move on then to Kevin Magnussen in P9 for the Haas. I mean, Haas as a whole was a very, very weird season. Magnussen,
Better than last year though.
No,
Last year
it was a good season. It was a good season for Haas. Just a very odd one, to be honest, because like some of the performances were baffling. How their car just went from the bottom of the grid to the 4th best team on the grid, back to the midfield, back to the bottom. Very weird. But Magnussen shining through as a kind of team leader when Grosjean had his big period of just meh. And Magnussen, I think that's got to be his best season F1. I think.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, one thing that pops into my head straight away when Kevin Magnussen was mentioned was how he has turned down the aggression, and I think that's helped him massively in terms of getting out of incidents, but also to just stay consistent and pick up the points. There were some races this season where he looked pretty much unstoppable, like running around in that 7th place. Like he was pumping in some incredible results. And you've got to say fair play to him, because when Grosjean had that dip, and we did roast Grosjean quite a bit on this podcast, saying that his seat might be under threat for next year with certain incidents such as putting it in the wall in Baku and just having no pace in other races. Shout out to Magnussen for keeping that ship on the right course and continuing to pick up points, because I feel like without that, Haas would have finished a lot lower down in the championship.
They would have, yeah. Fully.
I think ultimately Austria was a highlight, finishing 4th and 5th for them, making up for the Australia Gremlins, which again, Australia, say what you like, but they lost out on a big fat 20 odd points at that race, and about 10 apiece on each driver. So could have made for a very different reading in the championship standings if they'd not done that mistake. Ultimately, I think cost them. But I think Magnussen was great. I really do. I think he had a really good season. I'm not his biggest fan either, but I was impressed by his maturity this season to really keep it calm.
I'll give him a good solid 8 to maybe even 8.5 compared to his own previous seasons, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'd give him an 8 relative to the grid and 8.5 relative to what he's done in the past.
Yeah,
I
I'd
think
say
that's
just
a
a
pretty
solid
fair.
A solid 8 again with Hlkenberg.
Again, interesting reading though. He was qualified by Grosjean 11-8 this season.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows again the word has really been consistency of like
exactly.
It doesn't matter what you do in qualify. I mean, all the points are race day, so sometimes you don't have to be the best qualifier in the world.
No, obviously we are quick to give credit to Hamilton about being a really good qualifier, but it goes to show how you could be good on one lap, but still the consistency in the race is critical.
Fully.
So really goes to show, especially because according to Sky, the average gap this season between the two drivers on pace was actually in Grosjean's favour. He was faster by a quarter of a second on average this season, which looking at other drivers around me, which I'm looking at now, that's one of the higher ones.
Yeah.
We're talking like along the lines of Vettel versus Raikkonen in terms of pace difference. So it goes to show.
Fair play to him. And moving on to Sainz.
Carlos Sainz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke about he got unlucky a few times. He said that in his post-season sort of looking back at it, France, he was doing so well, and then MGUK or H failed on him. Monaco was tough for him because the team weren't that great, and he tried to make the best of it on a weird strategy. I'm just trying to remember he had one more retirement, didn't he, somewhere, or just something went bad for him.
Silverstone, he retired. I've got up his race results. He only retired twice this season, which is quite weird to reflect where he is in the championship, because he had a solid run of scoring points from China all the way until France, getting at least I think 9th, and then he got 5th in Azerbaijan, And he was just picking up points all the time. But then it was the kind of the mid-European season where he was either out of the points or retiring. But you can see why he is wearing the championship, because he still is picking up solid points at every single opportunity. And whenever he did get hit with a bad stroke of luck, it was most of the time out of his hands.
Yeah, I think his season goes kind of hand in hand with Renault's kind of mid-season decline. And I think he maybe just struggled a bit more than Hlkenberg did to keep it together. And I think that maybe is why the points gap is what it is.
Yeah.
Just looking at stats, he got 5th in Hungary in qualifying, obviously in that wet qualifying session. So at times, obviously, he has shown that he can be lightning quick. And he's actually reached Q3 2 more times than Hlkenberg did this season. So he has had these moments this season. Again, qualifying record, Hlkenberg 13-8. So he out-qualified him 5 times. But still, it goes to show, I think Sainz did himself plenty of favours, and hence why next year he's going to a manufacturer, regardless of whether they're fast or not.
I mean, for him, he's been one of those drivers that's been bounced around every season. Yeah. So I think for him mentally, it's going to be great to have a long-term, at least 2-year deal contract. I don't know how long it goes for, but at least it's a long-term one, we've been told. So stability for him is good, because he's definitely been battered of like, you're here, okay, go back here, you're here. So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing how he does just in there. Obviously, it'll be a tough job, but I think he did himself proud this season. I think he can probably... I'll give him like a solid... to be honest, I'll be inclined to give him a solid 8, because I think most of the issues he had were not really him, more of just where the car was. And like Tom said, I think Hlkenberg was just the better driver at handling it. But I think I can't personally fault him too many times of what he's done.
I have to give him
a few little
7.5,
errors.
Yeah.
I gave Hlkenberg 8.5, so I'll give Sainz 8. I think it'd be unfair to score them equally. I think Hlkenberg's been a little bit better this season, so
I think even on pace at certain times, I think Hlkenberg has had him a little bit, but not majorly.
I think, for example, Sainz for me kind of, I wouldn't say reignite my interest in him, but it kind of reminded me, a bit like Ricciardo at Mexico, Sainz at USA, I think it was, when he'd done that incredible overcut and went really long, finished 6th in the race, I think by like 30 seconds.
Yeah, finished 7th.
I think it was USA.
But in that,
or
he
Brazil,
did incredible.
I don't know.
Brazil, Abu Dhabi finished in 6th as well, which was a pretty big shock. And then to finish 5th in Azerbaijan.
When he went really long in the race, that one for me, the pace, the way he cut through the midfield and just kept on going and going and going, that one for me was really, really impressive. But I think for me, Hlkenberg ultimately has been a little bit quicker than him, hence why I'll give him half a mark off Hlkenberg.
And just rounding out Renault, I'm thinking I'd have to mark them a 7, just because of that mid-season dip.
I would go with that. Yeah, because they had a big old dip where it kind of looked like, oh my god, they're like slower than all the midfield teams for a bit.
I'll disagree. I'll go 7.5. I still think, considering how recently they came back into the sport, I think their progression again took a massive step.
Oh yeah, you can't forget about that at all. The fact that where they were,
and that's the reason why they finished 4th this year in the constructors, which again is another positive step. And they've got Ricciardo on their team for next season now, so I would give them 7.5. I think sure they slipped a bit midway through, but they were still so strong at the start of the season and at the end that I think I can kind of look past that middle part, because they definitely outperformed. I didn't expect them to be that high up, put it that way.
Making strides. And a team that didn't make strides.
Well, I was about to say, we haven't got to their second drivers yet, but I think because we're doing Renault, do you guys want to do Force India and Haas as ratings as well? Kind of, they're very close together in that fight.
Yeah, true.
Haas, I would give, just because they're so up and down, I can't give them more than a 7.5, to be honest. Like, I can't go 8, because 8 I feel is reserved if they kept their pace, but they just had too many races where it was like, what's happened, lads? Where's the pace gone?
I was going to give them 7. I'm surprised you rate them that highly, to be fair. I'll give 7 because they were still competitive.
Just because I think compared to Renault, I think Haas's upward trend this season was even way more impressive. Like Renault, they're a factory team. You expect them to do that, but Haas kind of like, what is this out of Australia?
With the help of Ferrari, let's not forget.
Yeah, with that, but I'm not one to. I don't really care about that. They do what they do. They do business.
My reason is very simple for Haas being a 7 and not a 7.5, or probably an 8 if this reason I'm going to give hadn't happened. Australia for me was a massive black stain on their season, because that ultimately, if you look at the standings, Magnussen, you could argue, could have got best of the rest in Formula B trophy. Yep. Grosjean would have most likely finished probably 12th, 11th, pushing that top 10. Yeah. And then them as a team may have potentially finished even higher still. So for me, Australia in itself was that just puts them down because that was such a rookie mistake to do twice in the same race in like quick succession.
I'll give Haas a 7.5. I mean, the fact that they managed to pull it back in certain aspects was very, like what Arav said, is very impressive for a team that is only being helped a little bit by Ferrari, but you know. You give some, you lose some, but the rating that I've got to praise very highly for is Force India. I've got to give them an 8.5 because I've got to remember that they had their points wiped mid-season, and they still managed to pull it back to where they were. And you've got to argue, really, looking at, for example, Perez and Ocon's first 3 races. Only one of them scored points, and then obviously they had that podium in Azerbaijan, but it was only really mid-season onwards where they actually started to score consistent points. So not only did they technically create a brand new team from the remnants of what old Force India was to new Force India and get through that whole issue with administration, and then go on to then bring back and do incredible amounts of development to that car. I've got to give plaudits to them. I think they did brilliantly.
Yeah, I've just worked it out. They would have finished 5th in the championship with the points their drivers have.
Yeah.
Because obviously the drivers' points didn't get wiped, but the constructors did, so you can still gather how many points they would have had, and they would have finished 5th, 11 points behind Renault. So, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's a fair rating. Spa and Monza were really good races for them, especially Spa. And considering everything they've been through and their consistency over the last couple of years, and I think they deserve an 8.5. I think it's good that they're still around, regardless of what you think of people in charge or whatever. It's good that they're still around. Then there's still all those people behind the scenes that still have a job. So yeah, 8.5 for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We're going to move on to Fernando Alonso, P11, like Cal was going to say before I interrupted him. Team not on the up, McLaren. Fernando Alonso, though, 50 points, his last season, maybe, in F1, maybe.
Maybe.
I mean, we've said it so many times before, I feel like a broken record, but the man just drags cars up, and he did that all season long. He's tried his best. He got 50 points. 3 points off Carlos Sainz in the Renault, and many times the Renault looked miles ahead of the McLaren, so that's very impressive to only be 3 points behind his fellow compatriot. I mean,
it's even more impressive when you think he's 6 behind the Haas, I think.
Yeah, that as well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I compare more just to Renault because they have the same engine, and you can compare the aero and the chassis thing. And compared to his teammate, I mean, Van Dorn had a mare, but we'll get to him, but that was maybe different circumstances. But
I think just the main thing to talk about McLaren is the fact that, Alonso scored his last points in Singapore. He scored 5 on the trot at the start of the year, had 2 retirements, 1 bad race in France, and then only 4 more occasions did he score points, which goes to show how good of a season. Obviously, they kicked off with a 5th place in Australia, and he did everything he could, and he was fighting all the way to the end, and you can almost see the point in his results where he decided to hang his boots up for Formula 1 for the time being, because it was just a downward spiral. But the fact his start of the season was absolutely exceptional when the car was competitive. And it was such a shame that it did decline, because we all had hope for McLaren at the start of the season. So the fact that they did decline wasn't a surprise, just more of a disappointment, really.
Yeah,
that's a perfect line, pretty much, to put it on.
Rating-wise, I don't know. It's difficult.
Oh no, I would give Alonso high. I'm set up 8.5. I really am.
7.5. I'd give him.
And the reason, I know the stats prove themselves, but the fact he 21-0'd Van Dorn in qualifying.
Okay, I'd give him an 8, actually. I'll bump it up.
I'm sorry. I'm
very sorry, but he was, the only man to do that again since he did it to Piquet in 2008. Like, I know Alonso. I've watched him since day one. He's not ever been a qualifying driver like Hamilton. And to 21-0 Van Dorn, regardless of whatever's happened.
I would say 8. I mean, to be honest, it's very difficult. I don't know. For me personally, it's hard to care about the ratings of midfield drivers when it's a situation like McLaren, where it's kind of like, I mean, their car's rubbish, so what does it matter? So I would say 8. Yeah, I mean, he's been an 8 for like the last 3-4 years in McLaren,
to be fair,
but it hasn't mattered. Like, it's such a shame, but he's been such a consistent 8, but it hasn't mattered. So I would say 8. I think Cal said 8 as well.
This is when the grey starts to go downhill now.
Yeah, this is where it starts to take the downturn with Ocon. Obviously, we already spoke about his teammate Perez. I mean, he had an interesting season. very up and down. Certain races like Belgium, where he really did do well, and also Italy the following race. He had another brilliant race in Austria as well, getting a 6th place. And he was consistent, especially in the, looking at here, the mid part of the season. During the European season, he was pretty much exceptional. And he did have his various amounts of retirements, one being put in the wall in Singapore. I'm trying to remember his Azerbaijan and Spanish retirements, but I can't really remember off the top of my head. Or Austria, I think that says. No, that says France. I can read. That's why I don't have my glasses on. But it's hard to rate him because he was, a Force India were a very quiet bunch this season.
Yeah, it's hard to judge.
I think I gave Perez a 7.5, so I'd have to give him a 7 because he was outdrove this season.
I'll go 7. I don't think there was some few sparks of excitement with Ocon.
It wasn't as good as last year.
If you look at his results, he hasn't improved.
Yeah, he wasn't as good as last year. Then you can argue the car wasn't there, but again, it's similar to Ricciardo. It kind of felt like since the team got saved by Perez and the rest of the it kind of felt like he got pushed to the side a bit.
I feel like mentally he got a little bit punched. When the clogs start to turn, like, oh, I'm not going to have a seat.
So I think 7's fair.
I'll go 7's fair.
I'll go
7, yeah. Then we get to a bit more of a happy story. Charles Leclerc, though, so you might have said the rating's going down. I don't think for Leclerc in the Sauber, 39 points, P13, obviously going to Ferrari next year. Ericsson with 9 points, so 30 points a gap, and he's had some exceptional results. Leclerc, he's obviously done some learning as well. His rookie season, so he had a few mistakes and a few fumbles, but I think as a rookie season goes, in the modern era at least, very, very good.
Well, he got Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, Rookie of the Year. Rookie of the Year, I would say...
It's a 9 from me.
I would say, I was going to say 8.5, but got on 9. I would say 8.5.
It's a 9 for me. I gave Lewis 9.5. Leclerc, at first, seemed to be struggling, but he got to grips with that car so quick. And
straight away at Baku afterwards.
Literally after Baku onwards.
Because he did that very, I think that was very telling straight away, and I think that's why he'll be good at Ferrari, that he kind of realised, oh, I'm going the wrong way with setups here. The F1 cars are just... He said it in a press thing, that F1 cars are naturally very understeery compared to the F2 cars, where they're way more oversteery, and he kind of realised that and went towards the understeer rather than away from it in the setup, and kind of found the pace there, got comfortable with it. And then when it got down to the actual racing itself, we saw some really great racing there throughout the season.
The amount of Q3s speaks for themselves.
I think qualifying, I was going to mention qualifying. I think
17-4.
We're going to cast our minds back to Brazil when he made that incredible decision to... it's not that great, but it was instinctive from a future world champion.
It was very telling, telling of him as a driver.
His team to stay out. He wanted to stay out because the rain was coming. He wanted another lap, and he saved his qualifying session, and that went on for him to get another 7th place after getting a 7th place in Mexico and a 7th place in Abu Dhabi. An incredible result in Azerbaijan to get 6th. And he did have that off period between Silverstone all the way through to Belgium. He had quite a bit of a sticking point, but then the moment he got through that, and you're going to get there on your rookie season, it was pretty much plain sailing. I think he had that Ferrari seat in the bag.
It was the biggest gap between him and Ericsson, the average gap in terms of pace. It was 0.510, half a second solid between him. To put it for reference, that was the biggest gap of the season between drivers. The second biggest was Alonso Van Dorn at 0.392 to Alonso, and the third biggest was Grosjean and Magnussen, which was a quarter of a second. So
it makes you realise why Leclerc got the Ferrari seat and why Ericsson's being dropped in arguably his best season in Formula 1 when the gap is that big, basically.
Makes you realise because he got out-qualified by Ericsson the first 2 races of the season.
Also that is very true.
Well, 7 Q3s as well.
Basically, a very, very good rookie season.
Yeah,
I don't think you'd be surprised at the start there as a rookie.
That's why I think a 9 is strong rating for me. I think he's made mistakes, but considering the car and the improvement, it's up there. It's up there. So for me, I think it's been great.
I think the reviews of each driver is going to suddenly become a lot shorter now as we get to the people who had pretty awful seasons. Grosjean, a driver that didn't score points till Austria, which is round 8 or 9. Can't remember which.
But that was a P4.
And that was a P4, but other than that...
Go with the... well, I don't know. I could go very harsh.
Grosjean could... I think it's a tale of two halves. His second half of the season was very good.
Yes.
If he'd been out in the first half, considering Australia as well, where he was and what happened, I think I personally wasn't one to say he should get fired. I thought I was a bit harsh on him. I thought he's done a good job, and I think in the second half of the season he kind of proved why Haas have kept him on at least for another year, and he bounced back. I think he still doesn't justify. I think he had a really poor first half of the season, so I'm going to probably say 6.5. For Grosjean,
I'll
agree.
6.
Yeah, I'll agree with 6.5.
But I still think he had a very strong second half of the season. With his qualifyings and also his race performances, he got quite a few six places from what I can remember off the top of my head.
He had a 4th, a 6th, a 7th, 3 8ths, and a 9th and a 10th. So I mean, he had his various amounts of points and times in the points, but he had his various points in the wall and outside the points as well, which doesn't justify, I don't know, he wasn't far away, in my opinion, from losing his seat, but he did what he could and needed to at the end of the season to save his seat.
For example, he made Q3 16 times this season, whereas Magnussen only did it 10 times. So there are those other stats where...
that swing.
Over one lap, he's got pace. He's just obviously, again, race consistency on a Sunday and keeping it together. But I think his first half, for a lot of people, might actually... That's what people remember about him, but I think he still had a pretty decent second half of the season. So I'd probably say 6.5, considering the points tally he has.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I'll go maybe 6.
Do you rate Haas as a team? Obviously, we are.
Already have, haven't we?
We did.
All right.
We did.
Okay.
So we move on to Toro Rosso. We can rate them as a team as well. And McLaren, I guess we could do, because Van Dorn's right there as well. Gasly, 29 points, P15, compared to Hartley's 4 points. I thought it was a very decent season for Gasly, to be honest, for where the car was. Clearly, the engine improved through the season, and I have a theory that Toro Rosso's car masked how good that Honda improved. So I think for next year, if things go right, Red Bull could have a very interesting next season. I think that Honda genuinely has some decent pace now. It is faster than the Renault, I think. And I think the Toro Rosso as a car had a very Toro Rosso season, to be honest. Started off well, they always do, and then being Toro Rosso, that classic case of they just don't spend much money on R&D after halfway through the season because they're Toro Rosso, because they just move it all to next year's car, because they are, at the end of the day, a junior team to Red Bull.
I mean, you can look at their results. You can see why Gasly's being promoted to Red Bull, because he had, obviously, the incredible Bahrain that still no one understands. You've got the likes of Monaco, where he finished in 7th. He finished 6th in Hungary. He had some really good results, but then you compare it to other races, such as China, where he finished 18th. And he had plenty of times outside the points as well, is what I'm alluding to here. And that was very much probably, and I mean, obviously, you would have the odd off race, but it was more likely down to the fact that he was driving a Toro Rosso more than anything, which is a shame, because Toro Rosso are a very up and down team, with more downs than ups, and it's a shame to see that. But like I've said, they are. It's sad, unless a major regs change flips the order between Red Bull and Toro Rosso, it's always going to be Toro Rosso that have less funding, and then meaning they are going to struggle a little bit more, which is a shame, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. But it means the Red Bull driver program is working, because they've now promoted another driver to the Red Bull seat.
Yeah.
And they've found themselves in a pickle with drivers, but they've managed to fix it by getting a certain Albon and Kvyat in for next year. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. I've not really got a hell lot to say, to be honest. I think you said it pretty nicely. I'm happy for him. I think he's had a good season. Excited for next year for him to go against Max Verstappen. I still think he's yet to show his best. I thought he was good this season, but not fantastic. I think it's hard to judge him against Hartley, because Hartley's never raced anyone in F1 before. So now going up against Verstappen, the person that we've seen in F1 for a few years, will give us a proper, accurate representation of where he really stands, because I thought he was pretty good against Hartley, but didn't blow me away as I expected him to do. So I'd like to see against Verstappen how he fares, in my opinion. But I still think he had a good season. I'd probably give him, all things considered, I would say 7.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I was going to go 7, yeah.
I'd agree on that.
Yeah.
I was going maybe 7.5, but I'll go 7 because...
Nothing crazy, I think, to push it towards 8 or 7.5. I think just 7. Just a solid season in the Toro Rosso car, to be honest. And the day he's been promoted. So
we may as well comment on Hartley as well while it's running, because obviously there's not a huge
we'll do
difference.
Hartley. I mean, I think he P19, 4 points. I mean... It was a tough year for him.
I don't think he was as bad as
he got a lot of bad
was.
luck. I think, I think I was sympathetic for him. So I think I would say 6 for him in terms of rating.
Again, I'd agree with that. I mean, we've got to remember a certain suspension failure in Silverstone.
Yeah,
certain crash in Spain,
the engine penalties,
Canada. He didn't have the easiest ride.
He could have had a much better season.
I mean, in the top 10 crashes of the year released by the official Formula 1 channel, he was in 3 or 4 of them. Trying to think, I think there was Canada, Spain, and what's his face, Silverstone. I don't know if there was any more, but that sums up his season quite a bit. The fact that he featured so many times, but it is hard. I mean, it was his first full season. So you couldn't really judge him too badly. I mean, he did improve the moment he got to tracks that he recognised, i.e. Austin, where he scored a 9th place. But other than that, it's a junior team. It's there to promote drivers. Hartley was drafted in because they didn't have any drivers. They've now found some, so that's why Hartley's not there anymore.
I think statistically, I think it's interesting. The average gap between the two of them was actually one of the smaller ones in the grid. It was only 1/10 of a second, 1.118 between Hartley and Gasly on average pace.
Which does balance up Gasly's speed and inexperience, and maybe Hartley's speed
sense.
And experience.
Because if you look at it, that might be the difference between making a Q2 or Q1, depending on where they fared. The qualifying battle was 13-6 in Gasly's favour. I think for me, I'd give him 6.5, and I think he's had an okay season. I think the reason I'm giving 6.5 is because I expected Gasly to smoke him away, and I think it was a bit closer than I expected. I thought Hartley did okay for himself at times. I think I genuinely expected Gasly to 21-0 Hartley. I'm not even being funny. Like Alonso to Van Dorn. Maybe not 21-0, but like 19-2, something like that.
Those lines.
But it was 13-6, and I think Hartley at times did show that he had good pace, and he's very unlucky most times.
And
like
team rating?
Silverstone. So, I think Toro Rosso, I'd say 6. I was going to say 5.5.
No, I'd say 6.
I was going to say 6. So
Considering
say 6.
circumstances.
I was going to say 5.5, but then I remember really, engine stuff isn't their fault, and it
isn't their fault. So I would say.
So I'll say 6.
I'll say 6. I mean, it's hard to tell where they would have been without so many penalties.
Car development hasn't been there.
So,
it was telling when Gasly said that the car, I think it was like Austin or something, he was asked a question, he said the car's pretty much not changed since Bahrain. That was pretty scary. So
I'll go with 6, moving it back up to Van Dorn.
Van Dorn.
And McLaren. Van Dorn, I mean, it was just a very tough season to watch, to be honest, for Van Dorn.
He's without doubt getting my lowest rating out of all of the drivers, which is harsh on itself, yes, because he's being, compared to the best driver on the grid, asterisks or speech marks or whatever, one of the best drivers on the grid, or top 3 at least, that he's now exiting. But even at the start of the season, when Alonso was scoring 5th place in Australia, he was only scoring 9th. He just wasn't anywhere near. He scored his last points in Mexico, which he did have a good weekend. But then there's this big period, if you look on Wikipedia, where it's a bit grey. He doesn't score any points.
Ouch. Yeah.
He just doesn't do it, and I think that's the reason why he's going to get a solid 3.5 out of 10 from me.
Jesus.
Ooh, I was going to say 4.5.
I was going to go 4.5.
There's a reason why he's exiting the grid. For me.
Okay, Jesus, right.
You know what? I'll say 4. The qualifying record in itself puts him down half a mark.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go 4.5 up 0.5 because there was that little thing about why is the chassis weird on Van Dorn.
Yeah, there is that, but I mean
that's why I'm not going 3.5 because
right, okay.
I'm kind of meeting a medium here. I'm taking into account the qualifying record, which was 21.0, but also the car mystifying
But then
issues.
Okay, we're going 3.5 in. Then when it comes to the team rating, what we say for McLaren as a team?
This one's going to be
I'm going
low.
to pummel them here.
Right, I'm going to say
4.
2.5.
Ah, you're kind. I was going for a solid 2. Solid 2.
I'll go
Solid 2.
2.5.
How can
Nah,
a team
maybe
of
I'm
this
gonna bring it
caliber
lower, actually.
make a car this bad, get
3.
it
And
that
get worse.
wrong, not realise their car was that bad, stop then upgrading when it was too late anyway, and just go so backwards after all the chat of, oh, Renault, finally, Renault. No, just no, 2.
Okay, I'll give him a
2.
3 just because of the amount of shit they were chatting. But I mean, even to justify my rating on Van Dorn, it was just the fact that it's just the way his attitude was to react to the situation. It's not like he was actively. I don't know. It just didn't feel like. I don't know. It just didn't feel like he. If it was Alonso had the bad chassis, he would have kicked up a bit more of a fuss. Let's put it that way. But
Yeah.
who are you if you aren't Alonso kicking up a fuss? Let's put it that way. But yeah, McLaren had
I
a
think
bad season. Let's put it that way.
my honest grade for them would be about 1.5. But I give them 2.5 because all the signs towards the end and the reshuffling and the drivers they've got for next season and the moves they've made towards the end, it all looks very good.
You can rate that for next season, though. We're talking about
Well,
this season.
yes and no.
Yeah.
It took place this season. They
Yeah.
decided to stop developing this car. You know, they said
I
they
don't,
could
I
have
don't think
bought in a
that I don't think like decisions they've made behind board for next year really matter. This
No.
season was a solid 2.
No, it was a bit
Yeah,
dreadful.
I'll probably stick with 2.5. I mean, still
Right,
shocking.
Marcus Ericsson, Sauber.
We say shocking. They still got sick from the championship in the constructors, so obviously there's still something. It's not like they finished last, so I
Yeah, it's
feel
good
like
to have
but I mean,
Fernando
it's,
Alonso.
it's a classic case of you do well at
Exactly.
the start, bosh the points, do nothing for the rest of it.
Yeah.
But still, it all counts. Doesn't matter how much of a shit house it is. It all counts.
It counts, but I'm also not.
It
letting
counts
them
when
off.
McLaren was
I'm not
winning
letting them off.
races 6 years ago.
I'm not then letting them off. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say 2.
Marcus
Doesn't matter what I
Ericsson, he was outshone by Charles Leclerc.
Very similar to
say.
Raikkonen.
Despite having
Yes.
a very good season though, so
Which is
Yeah,
um,
very
odd.
similar to Raikkonen, which is.
I
think that's the best way to put it.
really I wish him luck in IndyCar. I think he's going to go well there. I hope he's in one of the better teams in IndyCar, and I think it was a really nice season for him. He's been there for the team for a while. I think it was a good fuel season, despite him being beaten by Leclerc. But you're going up against Leclerc, the future Ferrari 2019 driver. So I'm going to say rating-wise, I think that was a solid 7 for Marcus
I
Ericsson.
was going to say I'd give him a 7.5 for Ericsson, but like bring it down to a 6.5 versus the rest of the grid.
I'm gonna just say 7.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, like
I
it's a
think,
good, like well done, like most improved player. But if you're most improved player, that means you were shit at first.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. I fully agree with that. I think that's.
I think the best analogy to give is like kind of one of the ones where, like school teachers, you kind of hate them all, but then you look back in time and you think to yourself, oh, he was actually alright. He wasn't too
Not
bad,
that bad.
compared to like whatever. Now, like he was alright.
It was a bit loud, but
Yeah, but he was okay.
got on-
compared
he
to
got
what
on
we
with his
got
work.
Exactly. So I think, yeah, I kind of grew to him a bit. I think Brazil was his highlight. That qualifying session, that was
Yeah.
up there.
but I've got to
So-
rank Sauber a solid 7.5, considering where they
I would
were
say- I would
last
agree
year.
with that. 7.5. 7.5. I agree with that.
I'm going 8.5. I'm going high on this, considering where they were last season, regardless of whether you think backing or whatever. Getting in Frederick Vasseur and taking
Alpha.
the risk on, and getting the risk with Leclerc because apparently they were going to go with Gio, regardless of what you think of him. Isn't no Leclerc,
No.
and stuck with Ericsson.
Yep.
Stuck to the plan, patience. Development was great. I think they worked well as a team. I think there was a really good team spirit in there, and I think 8.5 is fair. I think the most improved team on the grid this year, statistically, in every single track, pretty much by a long, long way.
Yeah, we saw that
And if you
every
look-
race, actually.
If you look last season on the brink of collapse, the same way you're giving Force India an 8.5 for potentially not collapsing,
True.
I've got to give them 8.5.
Brings a
I
tear
think
to my eye.
they've gone right back to where they were in like 2012, 2013, up there, up where they should be competing for the lower end of points
Yeah.
/ 5th, 6th,
And
in
being
that
a
kind
team
of
that
bracket.
gives drivers to the higher teams, i.e. Perez, following in those sort of footsteps. So yeah, I've got to say 7.5.
And I've got to give credit for getting a strong lineup in for next season as well. Not just going for the pay driver. Gio and Raikkonen is a strong lineup that will
well, that's
also
what happens
help
when
them.
you step up. You attract
progress.
better drivers. That's the way it is. And
Who would have thought?
and
So now we
finally,
move on to Williams, then the final team. Lance Stroll 18th with 6
and that's
points.
that for the podcast. So yeah, thank you for watching.
1 point.
Stroll, starter of the year by far. Incredible.
He was a very good starter.
I.e.,
I gave Van Dorn a 3. I'm going to go Stroll with a 4.
I give Stroll a 4.5 because of the starts he was doing. I mean,
And
his
I'm gonna
pace
give
everywhere else
Sorokin-
wasn't brilliant, but
I'm going to give Sorokin also a 4 because I think his pure team play attitude levels him with Stroll.
I'd agree. I'd have to give both of them a 4 and give the whole team a 4, to be fair.
Yeah.
Regarding Stroll, the starts he did, I think there's one, he picked up 5 places at the start of France. Every race he picked up positions at start pretty much, even in Monaco, I believe. But, he still picked up the odd point in Germany when the conditions were tough, and in Azerbaijan when, again, the conditions were tough, just with walls. But, 8th, actually. I'm looking at Hartley. But, yeah, that's it, really. He was very much handicapped by the car. As with Sorokin, really, he was just handicapped by the car, and the team being a little bit of a knob to him, really. The fact that they're kicking him out after... and getting in the driver that is coming back and is being very much hyped, which is very scary to see because I kind of feel like it's going to be very Schumacher-esque because I don't think Kubica is going to be as good as everyone says just because the amount of time he's had out of the sport. But we can talk about that at the start of next season. But yeah, it's 4s all round for me.
4s. It's a team of 4.
Yeah.
I don't know how to score this one. I'm all over the place because... If you judge it on like merit,
They didn't get any.
no,
Yeah.
no. But what I'm saying is, just like they never at all had a car to compete. So what I'm saying is, for example, McLaren was just as shit as Williams was, but we still grade Alonso pretty highly. I'm not comparing Alonso to any of the drivers. But what I'm saying is I feel like we're going off the car a lot and not the performance.
No,
but then
because
again,
I think they didn't really have like.
But I agree, there was nothing to really blow you away. For example, Sorokin just gives me that good feeling, but he was shit.
Does he, yeah?
I'm being honest. No, like what I said, that the good team player vibe, not wanting to improve himself as a driver. Like he made you want to root for him, but he never really slapped up Stroll in any race that I can remember. And he only got that point because it was a proper shithouse point because of the penalty in Monza.
Yeah, fair.
Stroll, I think Stroll had a decent season. I would give Stroll a 5. I would give Sorokin a 3.5.
Very much higher than us.
Well, for me, Stroll, this season, for me, was better than last year.
Yes, he was.
I think he's
I'll give
improved.
him that.
I think towards the end of the season, I think he kind of showed some maturity a bit. And I don't think him going to Force India is going to be a terrible move. It's not like a complete pay driver move. I still think he's got some pace in him. And I think he would give Perez a relatively good one for his money. And I think the way he performed at Monza, the way he performed at Baku, still show that he's got, good pace underneath him somewhat. And he has won championships in lower categories, so he's not like a complete nobody. So I'll give Stroll a 5. I give Sorokin a 3.5. I think the reason Sorokin's gone is because his main backer, SMP Racing, are out as a sponsor. Therefore, he's out because of the sponsor. And then, obviously, Kubica's bringing in this big oil money, Polish one, I think he's bringing in
Polish
next
oil
season.
money.
So, yeah, I think as a team, I'd say...
I'm 4.
3.
3.
I gave McLaren 2.5. I give Williams 3 because they did not improve at all, just like McLaren.
And thus concludes the whole grid of 2018.
Williams didn't start anywhere or promise anything, so that's why I say 4. But yeah, that concludes then the entire 20 driver review, rating, and all the teams in short. And like we said, I'm going to bring this all the way back to the start. Overall, though, it was an exciting season. Built upon 2017, got a little bit better than 2017, and we're kind of hoping it keeps on bubbling away for 2019 with the new aero that we don't know how much is going to affect things, but we've got Red Bull Honda, we've got Leclerc and a Ferrari. I would have liked to have said we've got a different lineup for Mercedes, but they're boring like that. We've got a lot of differences in the midfield as well, so it's going to be a very exciting year next year. But this season, it was just a lot of fun to watch, really. There was a lot of fun races, a lot of really fun moments. Great overtakes.
For what it's worth, people complain about the dirty air, but I've enjoyed the last 2 seasons more than 2016, 15, at least from my memory. I know Rosberg won in 2016, but I still don't remember that being a cracking season.
There's been some great stuff. I think a lot of it, for me at least, is enjoyment-wise, just because it's different teams, not because it's actually like there was some crazy. I think there was a lot more passing and just like actual good races. There were a lot of good races in the pre-17 era, but it was hard to appreciate a lot of them because it is the same teams.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that. I mean, but the fact that certain races such as Abu Dhabi kicked off a brilliant race, but then we had certain races like Canada, which we were so disappointed at. So it was a very mixed season, and hopefully next season with the reg change, we can have a little bit more battling, maintain the level of unpredictability. Hopefully the midfield can close up a tiny bit. Not banking too much on that, but I'm going to judge it on how many times I screamed at the TV while I was watching it, and I did it quite a few times because there were some very, very shocking moments at the front and throughout the midfield as well. So we can't really complain. Just we've got to hope that things close up, and we've got to buckle up for 2019.
Buckle, yeah. Ooh, lovely line. It was enjoyable. It would have been way more enjoyable if Ferrari kept in there and Vettel kept in there, but up until then, it was a stunning season. And then you got a little dip, but overall, then that just means it was a very fun season to watch, like we all said at the very start. Anyway,
I think it's fair to grade the season on a nice little bow tie.
Maybe. It's hard to grade a whole season, to be honest.
We can go specifics into like 0.25 to 0.275 if you want to.
I want to grade it against...
No, I'm not talking like that. I'm not talking detail. I'm just like, I've got no yardstick for that.
What I'm going to do is, I'm going to rate it...
You don't have to compare it to other seasons. Just for you personally, how did it satisfy you?
I would say... You don't
have to compare, necessarily.
I would say over the course of the entire thing, I'd have to say... this is hard because that dip did affect my thinking of the season.
I'm going to go 7.
I'm going to go solid 7. I can't go any higher than 7 because it did get a little bit disappointing that there wasn't a real title fight.
I was going to go 7.25/7.5, something like that, around that area.
I'll say 7.5, but I think a better way of judging it is the best season since 2012. Not saying better than
2017. Best season since 2017, technically speaking. I was going to say that myself.
Barring 2017, actually. Barring 2017, the best season since 2012.
Well, 2013 was pretty good as well.
I know, but it wasn't as good as 2018.
Yeah.
Didn't shock me enough.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Cal. Yeah,
Did
best
not shock
season
me
since
enough.
2012. Yeah.
2013 was too boring at the end. I mean, we knew where Hamilton was going to win, but he didn't win every race, and there was still certain drivers going at it, but... it's very hard to compare seasons and across engines and regs change. But in terms of how much I enjoyed sitting there and watching the TV, I definitely got the popcorn out this year.
Yeah, I'll probably go 7.25. I think I agree with you, Aarava. I think it was good up until that point when you knew it was over, and you kind of just wanted to be put out of your misery because you just knew it just delaying.
Yeah, because at that point, then I was just like, oh, now we're seeing some 2019 changes, and I was like, just get the new season started then, mate.
Actually. I'll go 7.5.
Oh
I just remembered, really, because the constructors, for once, went down almost to the wire for the first time that I can remember in a long bloody time. Because even when Red Bull were dominating, it was not close. I don't think we've seen the constructors go down to the penultimate race for quite a while, and it actually meant something this year. So I'll say 7.5.
I'll still go to 7. Yeah, I didn't read into it that much. It still didn't really feel that crazy to me, the fight. I don't know, maybe it's a media problem, but it really just... they don't hype up the constructors, so I don't feel hyped about it. There's no talk about, it's Ferrari v Merc. It's always this driver v this driver. So even it technically did, go down all the way to the second last race, I was like, it's still... I don't
if it was consistently all 4 drivers winning races throughout the season, then that'd make more sense.
That. And then at the same time, all that the constructors does is give the teams money, but you don't see the euphoria for the driver. The driver, Lewis and Vettel, they can say all they want about the team game. We care about winning as a team. At the end of the day, they want to win the championship for themselves. Yeah. They want to hold the drivers one. The team one comes second in their mind, I guess. So it's hard to... But like I said, I'm going to go solid 7 just because of that dip. I can't go any higher for me personally. And I'm hoping 2019 that can be a case where we get that word Callum and all of us have used this entire podcast, consistency. Hopefully we can get that across the entirety of 2019. Maybe. But I think that's it. Guys. So we've reviewed the 2018 season. That's the end of, is it our third season of podcast?
Jesus Christ, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, third season, yeah.
I'm getting
It's
old.
been a long time, man. It doesn't feel like we started that long ago. But yeah,
First one
that's
on
our
iTunes.
third season of podcast then. The 2018 season of podcast is done. We will return in what will probably be, I'm going to say, pre-season testing next year, 2019. So look out for that. I don't know when that is, like late Feb, I'm guessing. Late
Might have
Feb.
a rules change of our own for next season.
Yeah, late
maybe.
Feb. We might shuffle up things how we do the podcast, because definitely has been a little bit of a decline in the response of the podcast over the year. So we're trying to. I think it's more to do with how YouTube works these days, more so than the interest in F1 and the podcast. It's just kind of an algorithm thing. I'm getting too nitty gritty into it, but basically, yeah, some things will change, but hopefully in a positive light for you guys, and you'll get a bit more content out of it, maybe in some more kind of digestible content. That's a good word.
Yes,
but
perfect.
it's been enjoyable to make these podcasts nonetheless this season. Massive thank you, of course, to all the Patreon backers this year. You guys have been so helpful. You know, especially you literally funded Callum getting a non-broken headset earlier on in the year.
Yes.
And you've helped out massively in terms of just keeping it going. In terms of we've had a lot of off weekends where the podcast really has not performed that well, and the patrons been there to really help and still keep the spirits up and motivation up to keep making these. So thank you so much to all the supporters on Patreon.
Appreciate you.
And of course to all the SoundCloud listeners, to iTunes listeners, you guys have been going really strong. SoundCloud's been really consistent actually. So
Yeah.
very, very thankful to all you guys. And it's just been a great year, really. So if you are new around here, then do get subscribed for more F1 content. The podcast will return next year. Let us know what you thought about anything we talked about in the comments below. Obviously, you can catch us for next year on audio, SoundCloud, iTunes, still here on this YouTube channel. If you do fancy yourself getting it's pretty late to get a present, but if you do fancy getting yourself something over the festive period from GT Omega, a racing chair, a racing rig, whatnot, you can use the code PitlaneF1, and that will directly help us out. And am I forgetting anything else, guys? Socials obviously on the screen, but do you guys want to say any final thoughts from this year? No.
No, I'm.
Did I wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm thankful it worked out, and I'm happy we had a good season.
Yeah. Well, that's been 2018, guys. Till 2019. See you then for the Pitlane Podcast. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Hope you guys enjoy a good Christmas, good rest up, good festive period, and hope the next year is good for all of us. Not just F1, just in general. Have a good one, guys. See you guys next time. Goodbye.